Today's daf, we're going to be learning a Sanhedrin daf and hey. We're going to finish today the 8th parak and move on to the 9th. Shavua tov to everyone. We are going to get started, finish up our fascinating topic of Yareg Va'al Yavol, all the things that you're not allowed to transgress, better to die than to transgress. And we're going to see a bit of an interesting story. Amar Rav Yehuda Amarav. Rav Yehuda says in the name of Rav Maaseh Ba'adam Echad, there was a person, Shenatani Nad Bisha Achat. He was very attracted to a particular woman. Ve'elali Botina, and he was very, very passionate about her. And to the extent that he actually got sick. And they asked the doctors what to do. And the rabbi said there's no way to resolve this problem unless she has relations with him. So, Amru Chachamim, Yamut va'alti ba'elo. The rabbi said, no way, no how. Right? He has to die and he's not allowed to have relations with her. Amru Chachamim, ta'amod lepanav haruma. So the doctor said, fine. At least she should stand before him naked, and maybe that will help him so he won't die. Yamut va'al tamod lefanav haruma. The rabbi said, no way, no how. He has to die, let him die, and she will not stand naked before him. Tisaper imomeh chorei agadel. So the doctor said, fine. How about put up a fence? He's on one side, she's on the other side, nothing's going to happen. Why don't you allow that to happen? And perhaps that will help his strong desire for her. To which the rabbis responded, Yamut velo tisaper imomeh chorei agader. Let him die, and she should not speak from around this fence to him. Okay, end of story. The rabbis are unwilling to budge at all, and they basically say, let this person die. It sounds a little bit extreme, although on the other hand, in other words, I think there's different things pulling. On the one hand, this is the person's life at stake. On the other hand, what does this mean? The person's going to die because of their passion for a woman? And I mean, no one's discussing here what the woman's role in this whole thing is. I mean, commentaries might comment on that, but it actually comes up in some small context later on, but not in the Gemara itself. And if we look at the simple reading of the Gemara, it's unclear where the woman stands in this whole thing. Is she interested party, not interested party? Is she married? Is she not married? That's going to be the next question of the Gemara. So we're going to see that right now. One says she was a married woman. One says she was not married at all. She was single. So if you say she was a married woman, we get this whole thing. She was a married woman. That is serious transgression. That's called Giloy Arayot. And therefore, for sure, he can't have relations with her. Even the other things, it could be the rabbis just didn't trust him and felt like if they allowed something, his passion was so strong that it was going to, one thing would lead to the next. That's my assumption of how we view this. As theoretically, you could say pikuach nefesh overrides everything. Here you see, it doesn't necessarily override everything. Certainly not when there's a woman on the other side and we're using her body, so to speak, to save him. It seems a little bit odd, the whole thing. So Lamanda Amar Pnuyaita, my kulehai. But if she was unmarried, what's the big deal? Now, doesn't mean what's the big deal. First of all, it's not like any man could just sleep with an unmarried woman. On the other hand, it's not as severe a transgression if she's not married. So theoretically, you would say it's definitely not what we call arayot. Now, she could have been a nida, then it would be. But anyway, there's ways to get around that. She could go to mikvah. Anyway, it's a little bit hard to understand. The Gemara says, so Rav Papa Amal, mishum pgam mishpacha. This is even more interesting. Rav Papa says the issue is it's a humiliation for her family. And we're not going to allow humiliation for her family, even at the expense of this person losing his life. You see how seriously they took this whole thing of gam mishpacha. It reminds us of the Rodev sugyas that we were talking about recently, where it was kind of up there with murder. He says it was a different reason, which you could totally understand, which is they didn't want Jewish women to be having relations and sleeping around. Like, if we start allowing this, it's like we always say, the slippery slope, right? Where will it end up? So maybe this person, it's pikuach nefesh. The next person will claim it's pikuach nefesh, just to allow himself to do what he, to fulfill his sexual desires. So basically, we don't know exactly why, but the rabbis were unwilling to budge at all on this issue, which I think sits a little better with us anyway, particularly as women. I'm sure even the men who are reading this sugya. Now the Gemara says if she was not married, then why didn't he just marry her? And here's what some of the commentaries talk about. Well, she has to agree, and we don't know, maybe she didn't want to. But anyway, the Gemara asks, why doesn't he marry her? To which they answer, very interesting answer, with this will end the chapter, lo miyat v'date. That wouldn't help him. Why? Kid Rabbi Yitzchak, as Rabbi Yitzchak says, the Rabbi Yitzchak, b'yom shacharav bet mikdash, nitla ta'am bi'av nitna la'ovrei avera. When the temple was destroyed, the whole sexual desire for a husband for his wife, or wife for the husband, was taken away and given to, right, that strong desire was given to the transgressors. Shene'amar, how do we know? The pasuk says, Mayim gnuvim yimtaku, right? Stolen water is sweeter, v'lechem starim yin'am, and hidden bread is much nicer, much sweeter, much tastier, or people enjoy it better. And basically the idea that the strong desire for him was to have something that was forbidden to him. Once it was permitted to him, it wouldn't do it. And then he would, be sick and die, I guess, or I don't know what would happen, but it wouldn't really resolve the issue. With that, Hadran alach ben sorer moreh, and we finished the 8th chapter, moving on to the 9th. Now we're going to get to Elu hein hanisrafim. These are the people who get burned. Okay, burning comes up in the Torah in 2 places. We're going to learn it right now. Haba alisha ubita. Okay, now there's a study guide for today. I will tell you right now, the rest of the stuff is quite complicated. Hoping that with organizing it will help somewhat, and I'll try to keep going back to the structure, which will help keep certain things kind of clear. I'm going to open the study guide, and we're going to start with these psukim. So, just to remind you, in Sefer Vayikra, there's chapter 18, which is all the warnings, things who can't sleep with who. Okay, in 18 and 20, there are 2 different chapters about arayot, all the forbidden relations. 18 are the warnings, 20 are the punishments. So if we start with 18, even though I put it second on the sheet, it has 2 psukim that we're going to be dealing with today. One is ervat bat bincha bat bitcha, which is a man cannot sleep with the daughter of his son or the daughter of his daughter. Implied in that pasuk is also his daughter. Okay, it's kind of obvious but not said. Okay, lo turgala ervatan ki ervatchahen. Okay, not allowed to sleep with your granddaughter. Okay, it doesn't say his wife's child. So this could be, some people explain this pasuk to be referring, we're going to see it in Drashot later, about a woman he had outside of marriage, which could be either through rape or through some other, just out of wedlock. Then we have ervat isha ubita lo tegaleh, a woman and her daughter. Meaning you can't sleep with a woman and the woman's daughter, which sounds like your wife and your wife's daughter. And bat bina and bat bita, not only that, but also your wife's granddaughter, either through her son or through her daughter. Lo tikach ligalot ervata, she'erahema, they're very close to you. Zimahi, this is despicable, or I can't think of, it's bad, inappropriate behavior. Now, if we go to parak, now that's the warnings of what you can't do. So it says a woman and her daughter. Now it sounds like when we say Habali Shao Bita, that's what they're referring to. But if you look in Parakaf, Pasuk Yudali, where the punishment comes, and the punishment of streifa, it says, Isha shirikachet isha ve'et ima. A man who sleeps with a woman, presumably his wife, although it could be any woman, and her mother, which means his mother-in-law, not his wife's daughter, but his mother-in-law. Zimahi, again, this is despicable. They will be burned. Who will be burned? Him and them. Who is them is a little bit tricky, because if he has his wife and then he sleeps with his mother-in-law, both women don't die, right? It says he and them. It should be only the chamuta, the mother-in-law, should die. Okay, but we'll get back to that. It shouldn't have this zima within among you. Okay, so the main case, and this is just to be very clear because the Mishnah doesn't sound this way. The main case where you get burning, according to this, by Eish Yisrofu, is Isha ve'etima, a woman and her mother, which means we call it in the words of the Mishnah, it'll be called the mother-in-law. Okay? So Elu hen hanisrafin habal isha ubita. Now, this is a man who sleeps with his wife and her daughter, which really means mother-in-law. Okay? Ubat kohen. Okay, also a bat kohen who has relations with the man while she's married to somebody else. Okay, that there's special law of streifa, of burning. That also says in the Torah, but we're not going to deal with that today. Just, it's mentioned in the Mishnah. Now it tells you that yesh bichlal isha ubitan. Now this pasuk, theoretically there should be only 2 cases of streifa, but they're going to say that this case of Isha ve'et ima includes all sorts of other cases. We can darshan from there. Now, the simple reading is mother-in-law, but we can get from there to 9 cases, which are really 3 categories. Okay, and it's not really 9 because one of them is the mother-in-law. So 8, let's say. So what do we get to? Bito, ubat bito, ubat beno. If the man has a daughter, a granddaughter through his sister, through his daughter, or a granddaughter through his son. All those, let's say it's not the woman he's married to, okay? But it's a woman he obviously have relations with because he has a daughter through her. So he can't sleep also with the daughter of from whatever relationship he had, even if it's not his wife. Second case we're going to include bat ishto ubat bita ubat bina, okay, second category, which is if the wife is married to somebody else, he also can't sleep with her daughter, her granddaughter through her son, and her granddaughter through her daughter. And chamoto ve'em chamiv, and the mother-in-law, which we already know, but we're obviously saying that because we want to get to not only that, but the mother-in-law's mother, and not only the mother-in-law's mother, also the father-in-law's mother. Okay? So the wife's grandparents, he can't have relations with either. And if he does, any of these cases, you get burning, streifa. Okay. All those, how we darshan them, we're going to get to going through this Gemara. We're going to have a brighter where we learn that. So now the Gemara starts. That was all the Mishnah. Now they point out that the language is weird. What did I tell you? The Mishnah says Habal isha ubita. Now it shouldn't have said a woman and her daughter. It should have said a woman and her mother, or if they want to say the woman Habal isha shenasa bita. If you have relations with the woman who married your daughter. I'm sorry, the woman that you married her daughter, which basically means mother-in-law. That's what it should have said, but it doesn't say that, the Gemara says. Ela habali shao bita. So why did it use specifically that language? So they say the reason it used specifically that language, michlal de travaihu leisura. They now say something. They say the reason why they say isha ubita, you're going to get burning, and not let's just think about it very clearly. Isha, it really should be if it was going to say your mother-in-law, it should say the woman who you married her daughter, which means there's only one woman you're going to get burning for because you don't get streifa for sleeping with your wife, even if you slept with your mother-in-law also. So now they say, but it sounds like there's 2 people here. There's Isha and Bita, a woman and her daughter. So manihu, what could this be? Chamoto ve'em chamoto. What we're adding to this case in the Mishnah right now is saying, the first line of the Mishnah already included the main case. Remember, the Mishnah has a central case that's said in the Torah, and then cases that are derived from that by the rabbis. So they assume right now that when it says Isha Bita, a woman and her daughter, they mean the grandmother-in-law and the mother-in-law. And those are the 2 women referred to, Vikatane, and it says Yesh Bichlal Isha Bita. Michlal, right? And again, that is included in the words Isha and her daughter, Michlal de Travay Ktiva Behedya, which comes to say that they believe, whoever wrote this Mishnah, holds that in the Torah, when it says, if you sleep with, okay, let's go back to the Pasuk, a man who sleeps with Isha ve'et ima, the woman is not who we thought the woman was, the woman we thought was his wife. No, the woman is his mother-in-law, and ima, her mother, the grandmother-in-law. V'hanach midrasha atya. And the others are all learned out from a drasha. Okay? Everything else in the Mishnah is, right? Those 2 are written explicitly. All the other cases, these 9 cases, which now we have to drop, if you notice, we have to drop to 7. Because the last case of chamoto and em chamoto are already included in the first one, and just the em chamiv is the new part of the last case. So that's how we understand the Mishnah right now. But this is not actually going to be so easy to figure out who is the author of the Mishnah, or it's not going to work according to most opinions. In order to understand this, we have to go to a machloket, and this is why it's on the study guide, because it's not in the text here. We're going to actually learn it in tomorrow's stuff. But there's a machloket, Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Akiva, about this pasuk I mentioned before, Otov etain. What does it mean? He and them. They don't both die. So Rabbi Yishmael says, Otov et echad mehem. Okay, and the way he explains it is that in Greek they call echat hina, which is like eten, which means from the Greek we could see that that means only one of them, and only one of them meaning right the mother-in-law. And if it's just one of them, it means the mother-in-law, and the mother of the mother-in-law is learned by drasha. Okay, that's the way Rabbi Yishmael holds according to Abaye. Okay, well the way I explained it to you right now is Abaye's explanation of Rabbi Yishmael. Abaye holds Ashma'ud Dorshin Ika Beinayu. The difference between Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Akiva, they both have Aim Chamoto, but it's a matter of how they read the pasuk. Okay, so now let's see. In other words, both think that the mother of the grandmother-in-law, we'll call her, you get burned, but Rabbi Yishmael thinks the pasuk when it says Otova Etain only means one person, which means there's only one person who's forbidden here, and that's the mother-in-law. And the mother of the mother-in-law is derived from a drasha, from not the simple reading of the pasuk. Rabbi Akiva says Otova et shtehen. How does Abaye understand Rabbi Akiva? Otova et shtehen means both of them, right? He gets killed and they get killed, meaning who's the plural? The mother and the mother-in-law. And that fits our Mishnah. So Abaye, according to Rabbi Akiva, fits our Mishnah perfectly because our Mishnah says the central case in the Torah is mother-in-law and grandmother-in-law. And that's Rabbi Akiva according to Abaye. Okay, so let's read that inside and then we'll go to Rav. Hani chala Abaye, damar mashmu dorshin ika benayu. Maniti mani Rabbi Akiva. Okay, in one simple line, they say that whole thing, which is, look ahead and you'll see, Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Akiva have this debate. Abaye understands the debate as the issue is specifically this, is the grandmother-in-law explicitly in the verse or not? And according to Rabbi Akiva, it is, and that would match. But l'Rava da Amar chamotol achar mita itika benayu. Rabbi thinks that that's not at all what the machloket is, and nobody thinks that the grandmother-in-law is actually mentioned in this pasuk at all, which it leads us to say matnite mani. The Mishnah matches nobody according to Rabbi. So let's see what he says. What's the machloket between them? Otova et echad mehem, right? Only one of them or two of them? Well, the machloket is what if the wife dies? Is the mother-in-law still forbidden? Well, the mother-in-law definitely is still forbidden. The question is, do you get the punishment of streifa? Remember, streifa is a more severe punishment. Does he get the more severe punishment or she get the more severe punishment or not? So if you saw otova et echad mehem, it means, yes, you get streifa even if there's only one of them, meaning even if the wife is no longer in the picture. Otova et shtehen, according to Rabbi Akiva, means you actually, both of them have to be in existence in order to get the death penalty of streifa. If the wife is no longer alive, then the connection to the mother-in-law is not as strong anymore. And even though it's forbidden, you will get burned. You won't get burned for it. Okay? Now, you probably don't even get the death penalty. So, according to Rabbi, how do we explain the Mishnah? It doesn't match any opinion. Amar lecha Rabbi, tzni habal isha shenasa bita. Teach it as, in other words, change the wording. What was bothering us? The wording, isha ubita. It sounded like there's two people you're getting punished for. So he says it's not two women. It's not the mother and the mother-in-law. The mother-in-law and the grandmother-in-law. It should be read as, change the words, haba al isha shenasa bita. Exactly what we thought it should have said. He rereads the Mishnah to say that's actually what it says. Okay? One who has relations with a woman, which is the mother-in-law, who he married her daughter. Okay? And that's how we get there. Okay. That was all just to figure out the first two words and what's the real case in the Torah and what's learned by drasha. And we have this machloket. Is the real case just the mother-in-law or is the real case the mother-in-law and the grandmother? Now we're going to move on. Yesh bichlal isha. This actually is connected. There's one more thing to deal with Abaye and Rava, which is the wording in the Mishnah. Okay, and this goes back to, if you remember, we have the central case, which is either mother-in-law or grandmother-in-law also. And then we have these three groups of cases that all are derived from there. Now we're going to have to deal with the fact that in the third one, it says mother-in-law and mother and grandmother-in-law, which we already derived. So either we only derived mother-in-law, according to Rava, according to Abaye, we derived mother-in-law and grandmother-in-law. So why is this repeated in the last line as if it was learned by a drasha? So now they're going to quote that line. Yesh bichlal isha ubita. One of the things you derive from there is chamotova im chamiv. The mother-in-law, the grandmother-in-law, and the father-in-law's mother. La Abaye, so now you have to explain. Abaye who thinks that chamoto and em chamoto are already the main central case, and not the one we're learning by drasha. Taneinami chamoto ve'en chamoto, right? So, sorry. I did the kabbalah lemine em chamiv taneinami chamoto ve'em chamoto. So now we're basically going to say chamoto and em chamoto were only there because they wanted to get to em chamiv. Em chamiv for sure is not in the pasuk, right? It doesn't say anything about the father-in-law's mother. So according to Abaye, the Mishnah is chamoto and em chamoto. And the second part of the Mishnah, where it says chamoto and em chamoto, is really just there because of em chamiv, okay, the mother of the father-in-law. Le Rava, you can see where they're going now with Rava. Rava, only chamoto is extra. Well, I did the kabbalah lemine em chamoto, em chamiv ve'em chamoto, taninami chamoto. So chamoto is added to, right? We needed to get the grandmother-in-law, right, on both sides, from the maternal and the paternal grandmother-in-law. So we mentioned mother-in-law, even though mother-in-law was already included. Okay, and that deals with that. Now, what we want to figure out is how we get to the drasha of these three things. Okay, we have the daughter of the husband, right? In other words, if he has a daughter out of wedlock or something, or perhaps from rape case, if he sleeps with the daughter, or the granddaughter, or the granddaughter through his daughter or through his son, and we have the case of the daughter of his wife from a different marriage, and her granddaughter from son and daughter. And then we have the mother-in-law and the mother-in-law's, right? Really the mother-in-law's parents. Okay. In other words, the grandmother-in-law from both sides. So now we're going to have a braita that says Menani Bile. Where do we learn all this from? And we're going to bring the braita. We're going to have three cases in the braita, right? Three drashot in the braita, which are all going to be based on this word. You can already see from the chart, the study guide on zima. We're going to make all these gzerot shavot between zima is mentioned in one pasuk and is mentioned in the other. I'll remind you. Zima is mentioned in the pasuk about sreifa, and that's how we're going to learn all these things about sreifa from there, which is the mother and the mother-in-law. And then, right, basically a man who sleeps with his mother-in-law and possibly grandmother-in-law. But this braita is not going to assume that the main case includes the grandmother-in-law. This braita is going to assume, as we said, most of the opinions hold, it doesn't include the grandmother-in-law. This is just the mother-in-law. And then we're going to get through a drasha to the grandmother-in-law. And then we have this pasuk about the ervat in Vayikra Yud Chet Yud Zayin. We have ervat isha bita lo tegale. We have a woman and her daughter, which sounds like the daughter of your wife, and her grandchildren, okay, her granddaughters. And also it says zimahi in that pasuk, just like it says in the other one. So now they're going to say the following. Ish asher yikach. Okay, so Ditana Rabbanan, here's the braita. Ish asher yikach et isha ve'et ima. Okay, that's the first pasuk, the main one with the sreifa. En li'alei isha ve'ima. Sounds like just the mother-in-law. Bat isha bat beta bat benamina. And how do we know the wife's children, granddaughter and daughter? Because now, and that's, how do you know? Now, obviously, it's forbidden. We know that from Vayikra Yud Chet Yud Zayin, but it doesn't say there what the punishment is. So how do you know you get streifa? Because Ne'emar kan zima v'ne'emar lahalan zima ma lahalan bitau bat bena av kan bitau bat bena. So we're basically going to say, since it says zima in this pasuk with all the daughter and the granddaughter, and in the first pasuk it talks about in the earlier not the first Vayikra Kaf Yud Daled where it talks about the punishment, it says isha ve'et ima. So we're going to assume since they get streifa, the mother-in-law, also the daughter and the granddaughters are going to, if a man sleeps with his wife's daughters and granddaughters, he's going to get streifa, and so are they burned. Okay. That drasha makes sense. Now we're going to get to two drashot that nobody really knows. Well, we don't know at this point what they mean. The Gemara is going to bring a bunch of different interpretations, try to figure out what they mean, reject a few, and then end up with, for one of them, one interpretation, for the other one, two interpretations. So I'm just going to read it right now, but without really understanding it. How do you know that males are like the females? Okay, meaning, we don't know what this means. I'm not going to even go on. So because it says zima in both places, we're going to learn from one to the other, just like the males are like the females. In that case, the males are like the females in the other case. Okay, let's leave it. We don't know what it means. How How do you know that what's down is like what's up? Down, we assume we mean going down in generation, is like what's up in generation. So ne'emar kan zima v'ne'emar lahalan zima, ma lahalan lemata kilamala, af kan lemata kilamala. Just like in one place, the going down is like going up. Also in the other place, going down is like going up. We don't know what this means, don't worry. Uma kan lemala kilamata, af lahalan lemala kilamata. And also, going up is like going down. Just like there, going up is like going down. Also there, going up is like going down. Okay, we're going to leave that because we don't really understand it. The Gemara is going to deal with it right now. Amar ma. So Amar ma is we're going back and we're quoting something that we mentioned before. So the first thing they're going to do is try to understand the second section of this braita. So how do you know that scharim are kinekivot? What does that mean? Males are like females. My scharim kinekivot. Okay, so ilema, if you want to say is always going to be rejected. We're going to have two rejected common options here. If you're going to say bat bina ke bat bita, okay, that would be like we saw in the pasuk. The daughter, the granddaughter through the son is just like the granddaughter through the daughter. If that's what you want to say, well, bahade hadade ka'atyan. It already tells you that in the pasuk. In other words, if you go back to Vayikra, Yud Chet Yud Zayin, it says Lo tegaleh bat bina v'bat bita. It already says the male is like the female. You don't need a drasha to tell you that. So it can't be that. Okay. Next, El. Im em chamiv ke'em chamoto. Maybe you want to do it in the other direction, where the pasuk didn't mention it. If you say that when it said a woman and her mother, meaning your mother-in-law, maybe they wanted you to know not only, right, now you have to jump a generation because there's only the mother that's going to be forbidden. The father's not a player here, right? We're talking about a male sleeping with a female. So if you want to say the grandmother is included, right? The grandmother-in-law, and we want to say not only the grandmother-in-law through the mother, also through the father, and that would be scharim kinekivot. That kind of works. But no, it doesn't, because hashta em chamoto lo kamalan. Em chamiv mehadar halal. We're only in the second part of the Braita, and we haven't yet learned the basic law of the grandmother-in-law. So you can't say, oh, this is saying just like the grandmother-in-law through the mother, also the paternal grandmother-in-law, because we haven't even learned the maternal grandmother-in-law yet. So that can't be. So comes Abai and he gives his a third interpretation. This is now on Amabet. Abai says, Amar Abai, Hachi Kamar, Minayin la'asot she'el haba mimenu kishe'el haba mimenu. How do you know that, and this is, okay, now I'm just going to make this a little simpler for you. This is case 1 in the Mishnah. Okay, the first drasha, if you remember, the first drasha which we had, we wanted to know, how do you know, right, that the granddaughters are also going to be included and the daughters, right, not just the mother-in-law. So that we learned from the zima, right, and the connection between, it says bat bina and bat bita here, must be also there. Okay, that was case 2 of the Mishnah. That's why I numbered these here. This is, right, the second slew of cases. Bat ishto, bat bina, bat bita, bat bina. But now we're going back to case 1. How do you know that the man who has a relationship with his own daughter, again, not through marriage, because through marriage it would have been included already under bat ishto, but this is his own daughter that out of wedlock, or God forbid a rape, he has a daughter and he ends up in relation with her. So how do we know that just like the relatives of the wife are forbidden, also his own relatives in the parallel, right? Just like her daughter and granddaughter, also his daughter and granddaughter will be forbidden. How do we know that? Ne'emal kan zima v'ne'emar lahalan zima. Because when it talks about his children, okay, where is that? Okay, this is the pasuk I read you in the beginning. You might not remember anymore. Perek Yuchet pasuk Yud, ervat bat bincha u bat bitcha. The erva of your own grandchildren, which we said also means your own children, right? Your own daughter, and obviously your granddaughter through your son or your daughter. So because it says zima in that pasuk, and it says zima in this pasuk, right? That's how we learn it. And it says zima in the sreifa case. Remember, that's our main pasuk. Ishavet ima. So we're going to learn from one to the other, which is the woman's relatives, right? That's how we get scharim or like nekivot. Well, if you're paying attention, there's a bit of a problem because the Gemara asks, wait a minute. We said we're learning this from zima. Ha b'sher dideh lo k'tiva bezima. But the pasuk about his own relatives, it actually doesn't say zima in that whole pasuk. Let's listen to pasuk yud. Ervat bat bincha bat bitcha lo tikal ervatan ki ervatcha hena. It says hena. It doesn't say zima. So how can you say that we learn it from the Gezerah Shava in that pasuk? So Rava has a good explanation. Amar Rava, Amar li Rav Yitzchak bar Avdimi, Atya hena hena, Atya zima zima. Okay, we're going to do one of these like transitive property. In pasuk yud it says hena. That's when it talks about his relatives. In pasuk yud zayin in that same chapter, in chapter 18, it says hena. Okay, that's when it talks about the grandchildren of the woman, and it says zima. And then, so it has both Hena and Zima. So we're going to learn from Yud to Yud Zayin because of the connection Hena, Hena. From Yud Zayin where it says Zima to Vayikra Kaf Pasuk Yud Dalid, where it's the Sreifa Pasuk, which is what we're looking for. That's how you get that if a man sleeps with his own daughter, again, a daughter out of wedlock, not that he was married to the mother, or out of rape, then it's going to be Sreifa. Okay, the penalty is Sreifa, and that we figured out how to learn it from. That's what it means, Charim are like Nikivot. Okay, that his relatives are like her relatives, okay, in parallel. That was the second part of the Braita. Now we have to deal with the third part of the Braita. Amar Mar. Minay lasot lemata kilamala. Okay, so now what is this lemata kilamala? My lemata kilamala. Ile ma bat bina u bat bita kibita. If you want to say the wife's daughter and lamata is the granddaughter because that's a lower generation. The wife's granddaughter through the son and through the daughter, through her daughter, is at the same level of her daughter, and that's the drasha here. Well, bahade hadade ka'atyan. They're already listed together in the same pasuk as if they're all the same. Remember? Pasuk Yud Zayin, Arat Isha Ubitalo Tegaleh, Bapinat Bapi Talo Tikaf. It says a woman and her daughter and her granddaughter and granddaughter through the son and granddaughter through the daughter. So we don't need a drasha to tell us that. Okay, so that's rejection of option one. Option two. Maybe it means Ela Eim Chami Ve'eim Chamoto Kechamoto. Maybe we're going up, not down generations, but maybe Lamata Kilamala means the bottom is like the top, meaning the grandmother-in-laws, right? The Eim Chamiv and Eim Chamoto, which, by the way, if you notice, I just want to point out, Drasha 1 of the Braita explained case 2. This is just review, right? There's 3 lines, remember 3 cases in the Mishnah that were all learned out by Drasha. The Bito Bat Bino, which we learned out from the second line we just explained in the Braita, the second Drasha. There's Batisho Bat Bitam Bat Bina, that we learned from the first line in the Braita. So what's left is Chamoto Em Chamiv. So it makes sense that this is it. So this is sounding good, except that you might look at the chart already and see that it's rejected. If you want to say that what this means is the grandmother-in-law on both sides is forbidden just like the mother-in-law, but then the wording doesn't make sense. Going down is like going up. It should be the opposite. It should be lamala kilamata have. The higher you go, right, and the farther away from the man you get, is just like the lower, meaning the higher, the farther away is the grandmother-in-law, and the lower is the mother-in-law. So it's the reverse. To which the Gemara says, fine, so tnei lamala kilamata. Let's just change the wording and just say lamala kilamata. Okay, it's flipped. Okay, and then we say minayin lasot lamala kilamata. Well, there's a bit of a problem though. Ihachi, if we want to learn what we're basically, now we have to go back to the words of the Braita. This is very important because the Braita says, how do you know that lamala is kilamata? I'm changing it now because we have to change the wording. It's because it says zima here and it says zima there. Now, it doesn't say im chamoto anywhere in the pasuk or im chamiv, right? The grandmother-in-law doesn't appear anywhere. We're trying to say if we want to compare the mother-in-law to the grandmother-in-law to the mother-in-law, it says by the grandmother-in-law zima and it says by the mother-in-law zima, and that's why. But it definitely doesn't say zima there. Okay, so that doesn't work. There is no pasuk that talks about the grandmother-in-law. So, and as we're trying to find 2 psukim, one says zima and the other one says zima, we're going to try to learn from one to the other. That doesn't work. So, right, so they say, Ne'amar kan zima neralan zima umahashteinu lo ktivan zima ditu ktiva. It doesn't say zima. It doesn't say it anywhere, so of course you can't learn that. So now we're going to have a third interpretation of what that is, and then we're going to have a fourth. This time it's not just Abai, we're going to also have Ravashi. So I'm Rabbi. He's going to do a bit of a, like the last one. Both of them, by the way, are going to say it's Eim Chamiv and Eim Chamoto, because there's no other way to say it. And this is going to be the drasha we talked about from the beginning, that one person thought it was learned explicitly, right? According to Abai, according to Rabbi Akiva, we could say it was explicit in the pasuk, but everyone else really learned it out from a drasha. So this is the drasha. Am Rabbi, Hachi Kamar. Again, we're going to have two different variations. Abai's version of Ravashi. Minayin la'asot shlosha dorot lemala kishlosha dorot lemata. No, what Abai does is he keeps what we said before, which is we're going to switch the wording. It's lemala is like lemata, but it's not that lemala, third generation, right? The grandmother generation is like the second generation, like the mother-in-law generation. No, we're going to say the grandmother-in-law generation is like the generations below. In other words, going 3 generations up, man, mother-in-law, grandmother-in-law, that's the 3, is just like man, wife, children, daughter, and wife's granddaughter. So, Ne'amar lemata zima, and now we have it perfect, because we have the pasuk by the granddaughter that says, right, the granddaughter of the wife that says zima. V'ne'amal lama zima, and by it talks about the mother-in-law, it says zima. So ma lamata shlosha dorot, af lamala shlosha dorot. So just like the generations go down 3, they also go up 3. Okay, and that we learn from the Gzera Shava of the pasuk, same word in both. And you now have to explain the second part of the Braita. Okay, the second part of the Braita said, Uma lahalan lemata ma kan lemala kilamata af kan lemala kilamata. So now what is that going to say? And it's really going to have to be switched here, because it should be ma kan lemata kilamala af kan lemata kilamala. So let's see what that means. Uma be'onesh. Now when it comes to the sin, asa lemata kilamala. Now if you remember, what did we do? We said when it comes to the punishment's only mentioned about going up, the mother-in-law. But we learned that when it comes to the children, the daughter, we also give the same punishment. So they say, just like with Onesh, they took the lamata and they made it like the mala. They took the daughter and they learned it from the mother-in-law. So now they're saying with the warning also, there is no pasuk that warns you about the grandmother-in-law, but we're going to take the pasuk about the warning of the granddaughter and say that that's going to teach you about the warning of the pasuk of the grandmother-in-law as well. Okay, as if that teaches you a warning, and that you learn from the zima. So let's again. Until now, we've really been struggling with the punishment. How do we know we get streifa? This second part of the Braita is really just coming to say, well, we need a warning. You can't punish unless there's a warning. And when it came to the grandmother-in-law, all we had was the punishment. We darshaned out a punishment to get to the grandmother-in-law, but we didn't darshan out how to get to a warning for it. So now they say, we're going to learn it from that other pasuk, from the zima, that's as if there's a warning also for the grandmother-in-law. Okay, that was the third drasha, and with that, we would have hopefully finished, except that we've got one more problem. Okay, so that would have finished up our daf very nicely, because we basically, what we did very simply, even though it was not very simple, we took these 3 cases that they say were learned out by drasha, and we basically then brought a Braita that darshaned each of the 3. It was just hard to figure out which one was which and what did they mean, because it was kind of said in an unclear manner, but we figured it out. Now, they're going to go back to the second drashan, the Braita about the Scharim Kinekevot, the way Abai explained it, which is how do you know that his relatives are forbidden like her relatives? Now we're going to have a question on that. So going down in the study guide. Also, we're going to have a difficulty with Abai's understanding. Imahi aim ima. No. With the premise of this, before I read it inside, is that whatever's true for Scharim is true for Nikevot, or whatever's true for Nikevot is true for Scharim, basically. It's true for the female, it's going to be true for the male. So let's take it farther then, and that we know is just not true. Because ima asura, afu ima asura. Well, just like on the woman's side, her mother is forbidden, her mother's mother, right? That's what we said, the aim ima, right? The grandmother-in-law. Afu ima asura. His grandmother should be forbidden to him. Now, you might think, isn't she? But no, she's not. Actually, she's only forbidden by rabbinic law. So why not? So Abai's answer is very simple. Rav is going to be a little more complicated. Amar Abai, Amar Kra, Im Chahi. When it talks about the erev of his mother, you understand the question? The question is, If we're comparing it, Zcharim are like Nekevot, then whatever's true for her will be true for him. So if we learned now the grandmother-in-law is forbidden, so then his grandmother should be forbidden, just like his wife's grandmother is forbidden. Of course, his grandmother should be forbidden. And in fact, by Torah law, it's not. So Abaye says that's because it's a special drasha in the Torah. It says imcha. When it says about your mother, it says because she's your mother, which teaches you mishum imo atamachayvo v'yatamachayvo mishum ein. She's only going to be forbidden because she's your mother, but no one else is going to be forbidden for this, meaning we don't take it to the grandmother. Okay. Rava gives a bit of a more complicated answer. Rava Amal, Bein Laman Damar, and he gets into this issue about how we learn things. This was assuming that when we learn things, we learn it completely, everything about it. So now he says, well, there's two approaches to when we learn something. Bein Laman Damar, whether you say Dom Mina Mina, learn from it and completely everything about it. If you're learning from one to the other, you learn it, everything about it. Or Bein Laman Damar, whether you say Dom Mina Va'oke Ba'atra, or learn that there's a similarity, but keep it more within the realm of itself. Okay, we're going to see what this means in a minute, and you'll see either which way lo ati, either which way you're not going to get to the conclusion that his grandmother is forbidden. Okay, so now we have to go through both these possibilities. And then within the possibilities, we're going to have two possibilities that's going to split whether you think Streifa is more strict or Skila is more strict. So let's go through. Lemanda amal don mina mina. Mahi, if you're going to say learn it completely, Mahi em imasua, just like her grandmother-in-law is forbidden to the man. Afhunami em imasua, and then you would say also his grandmother's forbidden. Umina, and then you would learn, and here we're going to understand what it means, umina. Well, Mahi bisreifa, funami bisreifa. So just like, if you're going to learn it from Amima, you're going to say if a man sleeps with his grandmother, you get burned. Now, what's the problem? Well, a man sleeps with his mother, he gets skila, not sreifa. And now if he sleeps with his grandmother, he's going to get sreifa. So now we're going to ask our questions. And our question is going to break down to whether you think sreifa is more strict or you think skila is more strict. So we're going to have many more questions if you think sreifa is more strict, because think about it. I mean, the obvious question, although we'll get to it in a minute, so I'll just wait. Okay, we'll get there. So you could ask the following question. Ma lehi shekeni ma b'sreifa, tomar behu she'imo b'skila. Now, if the mother-in-law is b'sreifa, and the mother, his own mother, and it's his mother-in-law, he gets burned. But his own mother, he gets something more light, which is skila. So you can't, what does that show you? That the mother's relatives are actually, the law is more strict than for his own relatives. So then you wouldn't come to the conclusion that his grandmother's definitely forbidden. That's number one. Number two, this is the, I think, most obvious question. Imo b'skila, imo b'sreifa. You're going to end up giving him a more harsh punishment for his grandmother than if he sleeps with his mother. Because again, this is assuming sreifa is more strict. So that makes no sense. And third question, which we'll see in a minute, is the only question that's going to be relevant if you think skila is more strict, because it does, the other two were only questions because we thought sreifa is more strict. This one's going to go according to both, which is mahi. Second. So I'm sorry, I just lost my place. Maybe I'll just read it from the study guide. Ve'od mahi lo chilakta ben ima le'em ima. Now, the mother-in-law, right, and the grandmother-in-law are no different. The punishment is sreifa for both. So you would say af hunami lo tachlok bo ben imo le'em imo, right, and then shnehem both should be skila, right? You're ending up with this weird thing, weird in a bunch of ways. But the grandmother is either going to be, is going to be sreifa. The mother is going to be skila, which again, if sreifa is more strict, that doesn't make any sense. And even if you don't say sreifa is more strict, which we'll see in a minute, which is lamanda amar skila chamura mahai kushia lo nidona. Basically, we're only going to ask the last question. But basically, you're going to have it weird. Why would he get a different punishment for his grandmother and his mother when if we're learning it from her, it's the same punishment for her mother and her mother-in-law, and her own mother and her own her grandmother. So why would you switch on his side and have, if he sleeps with his mother, it's skila, and he has a different punishment if it's his grandmother? So that doesn't make any sense. So that's why you would never conclude that you would get sreifa for sleeping with the grandmother. Okay, now and even they would be forbidden really. Ulamanda amar dok mina Lamanda amar dok mina. Okay, ba'atra. Now, if you say learn from it that the grandmother's forbidden. Learn from the grandmother, right? From her grandmother, that his grandmother, from the grandmother-in-law, that his grandmother will be forbidden. But okay, but learn it like it is by him, meaning, what would that mean? It would mean that he would get skila, just like for his mother, he gets skila, for his grandmother, he'll get skila. Even that's going to be a problem. Why? Well, mahi emi ma'asura, afunami emi ma'asura, right? This is just explaining what it would be, that you would say, just like her grandmother's forbidden, afunami, his grandmother will be forbidden. V'okei ba'atro, but learn in that case, hatamu b'dib'sreifa, val hacha b'skila, kedesh kachan b'imo, right? Here it would be skila, though, like for his mother, okay? If you say that, we're going to have problems. Also, I fill this in the chart, but we're going to continue with this tomorrow because it's already into tomorrow's stuff. So we'll stop here. But basically, what they were trying to deal with here is if you say scharim are like nikevot, then just like her grandmother, meaning his grandmother-in-law is forbidden, his own grandmother should be forbidden, and it's not. So again, Abai said it's because it says imcha, specifically only your mother's forbidden. And Rabbi says it's because the way we would learn it, you would come up with all these problems, basically, as we saw. Okay, things just wouldn't make any sense, and therefore it doesn't make any sense to learn that. Okay, and that's where we ended. So again, what we did today, besides the very beginning, where we had this man who couldn't handle, and wanted to sleep with this woman, and the rabbi said, no way, no how, thankfully. Then we get, I feel bad for the man, but I feel worse for the woman. Again, like I said, we didn't really relate to what her role in this whole thing was. Then we get to the Nisrafim, and really the big thing was the structure. The Mishnah had one case, which is the main case, and from there were 9 other cases, or 8 or 7, depending on how you read it, that came out of this Mishnah. And then there was this debate about whether the main central case that's learned out from the Torah includes the mother of the mother-in-law and the grandmother-in-law, or perhaps just the mother and the grandmother-in-law is learned out from a drasha. And then we basically went into all these drashot of how we learned all the cases in the Mishnah. And it was a little complicated, but we got there. Wishing everyone a good day and a Shavua Tov and Besorot Tovot.